are listening to OffPlanet Radio at offplanetradio.com.
OffPlanet Radio, OffPlanet TV. I'm Randy Maugans. Welcome to the show for this week. And you asked for it. I got a lot of positive responses a few weeks ago. And so we're going to do something tonight that marks kind of a new, I guess, a new generation of OffPlanet Radio, OffPlanet TV. My guest a few weeks ago, Emily Moyer, was with us. And as we announced then, we planned to begin launching what is the beginning of a new platform, a new media platform that will launch off of this eventually. Part of the goal of what Emily and I are trying to do is we want to bring arts and music and all of the things that are good about life into the alternative media and use them for what they were intended to be, which are expressions of human consciousness and the evolution that we're going through as we go through these things. And so having said that, I want to introduce to you tonight my co-host and producer of this show, Emily Moyer. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here. I'm super excited for tonight. We have a great guest that we'll introduce to you shortly. And I'm just excited for this going forward. Have lots of neat ideas and can't wait to have some fun with this.
Our guest tonight is going to talk to us about some very interesting subjects that kind of bring together a lot of the subjects we've talked about on this show for a long time and that many other people have discussed as well. Because we're going to talk about what's in our skies. What really is going on in terms of the chemtrails? What is going on in terms of the craft that are seen above our skies? And many have seen these craft for a long time. Sean Gautreaux is an illustrator from New Orleans, Louisiana, who's been photographing cloak craft in the skies for almost 5 years now. Initially intrigued by unnatural weather patterns in the summer of 2011, he studied possible weather manipulation techniques to explain what was happening above. After buying some video equipment, studying radar and satellite photos, he realized that there was much, much more to the picture. On August 8th, 2011, Sean saw his first diamond-shaped craft hovering in the sky for about 4 minutes. He captured it on video by accident. He was hooked. In June of 2012, he released the first 9 parts of his series, What is in Our Skies, on YouTube. Months later, the next 10 parts were released. Though the initial video series was 3 hours long, it has now grown to somewhere over 8 hours of information showing photographs and video evidence of possibly millions of craft above and inside of our atmosphere. Is this the first small step in true disclosure? Possibly. And to answer that question and discuss all the things that are of material interest in the subject, we welcome to the program Sean Gautreaux. Welcome.
Randy and Emily, thank you so much. It's great to be here. And we're going to have a really interesting discussion.
Emily, I'm going to kind of let you field some of the questions initially, because you are, after all, the co-host and the producer of this show, and the first pass tonight.
Okay, so why don't you just tell us a little bit about what you saw, what you really saw when you looked on the radar on the satellites, and then what you saw that first time, and sort of what drove you and where this took you, and and tell us what's in our skies.
Sure. At this point, it's been just about 5 years when it all started. And it started with weather patterns here in New Orleans. As a New Orleanian, we tend to pay attention to the weather because in the summer sometimes we get it pretty bad. So that year we were having, at least locally, an extreme drought. But to the south of us, they were getting a lot of rain. So I didn't really understand a lot about it until I looked at the radar and realized that the typical storms that would come up from the south, from the Gulf of Mexico, were getting stopped consistently at just about the same spot. And they would come up and dump all their rain, hail, lightning, whatever, just along this line. And 10, 15 miles to the north where I am, we wouldn't get anything. And so that's where it kind of started. So I ended up getting some small cameras, some HD video recorders, and started recording what was going on above to try to figure out, okay, why are the storms stopping? Why is this happening? So on and so forth. And it was through that's where it really began. But I also realized if I'm looking from the ground up, I should be looking from up above to the ground and see what I could discover on radar and through satellite. So I tapped into the government radar site. It's simply radar.weather.gov, and watched that and started recording that. And in the meantime, I found a really good resource for NASA USGS satellite photos from way up. And I was seeing if I could see anything in that, whether it be chemtrails or waves or patterns, EMS, whatever. So it was downloading those and downloading the thermal satellite images that you could lay over one another and tell what was hot and what was cold, that some of these crafts started appearing. Now, we'll talk about that at some point. But going back to the weather manipulation and recording what was above, I could see that there were forces up there, vortexes, what I called them originally. It seemed like pointed energy waves that were affecting storms coming in. They were blasting cumulus storms within 7 minutes, that kind of stuff. So that got really interesting. I was able to pick up on, while watching the video, especially at a faster speed and enhanced with a little bit of contrast, there were things, dynamics going on in the clouds that I suspected were some kind of craft, some kind of weather balloons, possibly, whatever it may be. And this was early on. This is before August 2011. But August 8th, 2011 is when I stepped outside and I put out one of the small HD cameras, and it was pointing up about 45 degrees. Up in the upper atmosphere, there was what seemed to be like a layer of chemtrails, chemicals, clouds, something thin up there, where there were anomalies, things that looked disturbance-like in that layer. So I pointed the camera up, turned around, actually lit up a cigarette, looked back around about 30 seconds later, and in the sky there was what I call a black diamond. It looked like it was half in, half out. The sunset was, the sun was setting, so it was really kind of showing it off. And my suspicions turned out to be correct. And I stood there. It was absolutely the weirdest thing I've ever seen. And I ended up speaking to it like, I told you little bleeps not to show up in the right light, or I will find you. And lo and behold, there it was. So I looked on the camera, which I had set up, and it was just under the center point in the camera. So I knew I was capturing the whole thing, which is really weird. So I went back, I looked at it, and I'm like, well, if it sees me, maybe I should turn away and pretend I don't see it. It was just the weirdest things, and this went on for 4 to 5 minutes, and then until I realized up above and in the camera, it had disappeared. So shut it down and checked out the video in the computer, and it was there. So that's really where it started. Kind of freaked me out. The next day was my birthday, and this will probably tie in later.
Oh, wow.
I was just turning 41. This is the last day of my 40th year. I turned 41, and I called up 3 friends, 2 who could come over. And I said, you've got to look at this stuff. I don't know what I'm seeing up there, but you got to look at this video. And 2 of them who were local came over and checked it out. And one was freaked out, and the other one was kind of like, you're onto something. I just don't know what it is. So, which was great to have people check it out, because trying to have other friends check this out is pretty tough. But they've stuck with me the whole time. And the lady who was here, we'll call her Nancy, has seen a lot more than I have, and it ends up tying into the military and so on and so forth. But we'll get to that later. Anyway, after that, in that fall, I was designing 3 children's books at the time, so I really didn't have time to study the skies too much, but I'd put out the camera and record 20, 30 minutes at a time. And if I had the chance, I'd bring it into the computer, have a look at it, and see what I could see. But it wasn't until November of that year to where I really had a chance to sit down, work aside. The books were done. We were going to be in time for Black Friday. So I was good. And I started researching and looking up, because I'm thinking military the whole time initially, and looking up old projects that they may have had, and started comparing names like the DART, which is one of the terms that I use for one of the real small craft. There it was as some kind of project many years ago by NASA, the Navy, whoever. So that really started lining up. However, I left the possibility open that some of this was ET. I really haven't had a lot of experience in it, but my technical nature says this has got to be some kind of government weather control program with blimps or something. So that's where it started. It was recording the hologram faces that led me back to deception, that led me back to possible military applications. So I've been going back and forth for years. And after about 3 years of my head spinning, I finally decided, you know what, it's probably both. Yeah. So that was a turning point and set my mind at ease a little bit.
Yeah, that's interesting. A couple of things you say. Like, I wonder, when you were describing that weird feeling, that few minutes when you were sort of talking to it, like, were you aware in that moment that your life was probably never going to be the same? Was it that kind of weird feeling, or were you scared, or what was going on for you inside?
I wanted to step away, like under the patio, so where I wasn't seeing it and it couldn't see me, but I wanted to make sure and go back it was still there.
Right.
So it was really weird. I mean, talking to some kind of shadow in the sky is weird enough. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I knew, especially the next day and following that I had to do something. I had to expose it. And yeah, so I'd probably go down the route of losing friends, or losing trust in friends, or their trust in me, or whatever, but I had to do it. There's a lot of things in life that I regret not following. But this one, it takes the cake. I mean, I've seen some weird stuff in my life, but this was like, all right, I know I'm on to something. Yeah. I got to do something with it.
So I just have to ask you this now, since it's got a little bit out of order, but you obviously started talking to it. So obviously, instinctively, from the moment you discovered it, you felt like there was possibility for communication between it and yourself, whatever it was, which is interesting, because I've often had the feeling I've had some experience with this, both with what we would term to be more regular kind of like chemtrail geoengineering, but also with some more of what you look at, like strange machinations in the clouds and cloudcraft, where I could swear that I'm talking about it and it is responding to me. What do you say about that?
if I have conversations with them up above, it's more like, go away. I don't want to see you anymore. I've literally flipped them off, and it hadn't done any good. Coming around.
That doesn't work. No.
No, it doesn't work at all. But they just keep on coming back. The telecommunication thing, I'm not going to say I've really experienced, but I've heard from many people in the last years who have contacted me and said, these things are communicating with me. And I really haven't been able to respond to them, but there was a fellow researcher and a friend in California who was kind enough to take these people on and talk to them and see what's going on. And it seems like a real thing. I just can't say for sure myself.
So I'll tell you briefly the kind of three things that I can think of that have happened. So one of them, and it's happened more than once, but I'll just say for a brief one. One of them is with standard chemtrailing. And I was standing outside, it took me a long time to convince my father that this phenomenon of chemtrails was real. Eventually he had to acknowledge it. But we were standing outside one day and we were talking about it, and there was not a chemtrail in the sky. And as we're talking about it, they start to appear. And I'm like, watch, look, they're drawing it right over the house. They're doing one over here, over here. It was like responding to me talking to my father about it. It was really weird. And he had to acknowledge that was what was happening. So there was that. Then there was another time when I was in Indian Wells at the tennis tournament they have down there. And I was having trouble watching the tennis because they were just obliterating the sky with chemtrails. And when they were done painting the sky white, they started with black lines. And I said to myself, this is effing ridiculous. And right when I said that, they made a smiley face with the black lines, with the black up above. And I showed my mom. My mom saw it. We were like, what on earth is going on? And then the last one was once I was in the vet's office. And I had noticed driving to the vet's office that there were some cloak craft in the clouds in the sky above. I got into a conversation inside the office with her about visions that I have when I'm dancing. I'm a dancer, and I was describing to her what an energy formation disc looks like. And when I walked outside of the office, right above the vet's office, inside where the craft was before, there was now in the sky a cloud that was exactly shaped like the disc I was trying to explain to her.
Wow.
It's hard enough. Well, if we just took the chemtrail issue for a moment. Now, I've been immersed in the chemtrail issues since about 2004, when I first became formally aware of them, although I was seeing these in the skies in the late 90s, early 2000s. So it's enough to talk about that because it's very clear to me that most people don't look up in the sky, aren't aware of what's going on around them, and frankly have no flipping clue at all of what those things are in the sky or what they're doing there. Most people simply are not that aware. Now, thanks to the internet, we have a groundswell of awareness that started to continue. But when you add in the anomalous craft issue, much less the ET issue, just leave that for a second. We could safely park that and say, okay, we know the military have advanced craft. We know that the designs of these craft, certainly the stealth bomber demonstrated that we were moving forward in design of jets away from what was considered to be a normal jet-type design. But then you bring the issue in of, are they our craft? Or are they something else that's out there? You now have blended into this whole thing a recipe for basically being called a nut job. I've been doing this long enough to know the reaction as I've shared my own experiences, my own observations, that you risk, not only having your sanity questioned, but the relationship of people around you who simply can't open their minds to that. So I will say this, you've made phenomenal progress in that short period of time towards this, which leads me to think something inside of Sean Gautreaux is predisposed to believe a truth and therefore to find the truth. That wasn't a question, but it was a statement. Come on, Sean, jump right in there.
You want me to get into chemtrails?
Sure,
Not a problem. Absolutely. My first experience with chemtrails, and I didn't even know what they were at the time, was when I used to walk to work in New Jersey, out in Fair Lawn. The train would drop me off. I'd have 30 minutes to walk to work. I started seeing these trails up above. This was probably, 2001, 2002, where three planes would connect or fly over the exact same spot and leave a trail and leave a six-spoke design in the sky. I thought that was a little weird. I had learned a little bit about it after 9/11, because when I started looking into the information about that, it led me to chemtrails. I didn't know what to think about it. When I moved back to New Orleans, I used to walk to work again, and there they were up above. Same kind of thing. Three planes hitting the exact same spot over. That doesn't make any sense. So didn't think anything of it. In 2011, when I realized I could step out in my backyard and see three different colors of clouds or cloud material, or what I call now simply plasma, above, I'm thinking there's an external agent being pumped into this scenario, giving it a different color, and this is what this weather control is all about, possibly. And like mentioned before, I downloaded a lot of these NASA files. I downloaded a file I shouldn't have, and it even had a warning. And I ended up meeting the programmer like 2 years later and explained to him what I did. And he's like, yeah, you probably shouldn't have done that. But it was a 156 meg file. It came with the satellite photos. And when I installed it, it started taking down my hard drives one by one. This is August 1st, 2011.
Wow.
Yep. So the H drive went down. I restarted. It was attacking the C drive. That went down. I had this machine for 10 years, and I'm like...
Did you say that was August 1st, 2011? So within 1 week of that was when you discovered the craft in the cloud?
1 week later, it appeared up there.
That's crazy. Okay.
Yeah, that's an
So I considered this computer done, and I had to buy a new one. And I stepped outside. I'm like, okay, that's finished. And I looked up, and there was a chemtrail plane coming right over. And I'm thinking, all right, if this is a chemtrail plane, does it have anything to do with material in the sky that has to do with weather control? And that's how I came across chemtrails. The chemtrail movement today seems very fractured. And
it is.
For me, the reason being is that everybody thinks they're right, and anybody else who has a different opinion is wrong.
Yeah.
But they take into account that there's probably multiple programs going on, and that there's a possibility that many of them are right, because it's multiple things, and then they can come together a little bit. So
yeah, I'm glad you went there with that, because one of the things that Randy and I have been talking about a lot in our private conversations is we need to get past this idea of either this or that, because the answer to things is both things and something else too.
And more, right?
And more, yeah. And it's interesting to me. Through just discernment and years of looking at all these things, anybody who's not willing to look past their own idea about it, I'm suspicious of. Like these people who go on and on and on about the world is going to end tomorrow if we don't stop the chemtrailing program, but won't even acknowledge or look at your work, or on the flip end, acknowledge or look at the work of someone like Clifford Carnicom.
Yeah.
I don't understand. It's weird to me how people can become so obsessed on these chemtrails, but absolutely refuse to look at what's inside of them or what is beyond them. What else is hiding behind them? It's fascinating to me, because I think there's no way, if you're not willing to look deep into something or look beyond it, that you can ever figure out what you're looking at.
Yeah, you've got to keep on putting on, like I've said, even with this whole craft thing, your HD glasses, and expand the horizons and keep them open. Because really, we're at a point where we're comparing things, or at least I am, comparing it to this. Is what is the probability of this connecting directly to this, and so on and so forth. So you've really got to keep it open, and there's a pretty darn good chance to me, that the chemtrail thing, whether cloaked as mind control, weather manipulation, the destruction of crops, whatever, I know for a fact, for me, that a lot of it has to do with these craft.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, is what do you think the relationship or the interplay between the two different things are?
At this point, it all depends on what they are and if it's at least two different types. Initially, I was thinking military. This is a military program. I'd watch the chemtrails. Does it have to do with weather control? Does it have to do with radar? And once I started recording, I realized that a lot of times it seemed like these planes were intentionally targeting what I could now recognize as craft within the clouds, some kind of structure. So I recorded that. I would see some that were sprayed, they would fall, they would actually stabilize in the air and stop falling, and then it clumped into a little cluster, and I figured, what's the relationship between that cloak craft and that cloud and that chemtrail? So I recorded a lot in infrared, which really helped me distinguish what was going on with that. And I could tell there was a platform in the sky here. The chemtrail literally fell on top of it. So it would stabilize there, but where it didn't touch the craft, it would continue to fall, get sucked into these vortexes, that kind of thing. So that made a lot of sense to me that they were intaking the chemtrails. It wasn't until I think it was November or October 2013, I had a very distinct recording of a chemtrail plane coming across, laying a line, and right below that line was a triangular plasma craft and a sphere below it that literally sucked in this chemtrail, and the thing disappeared just like that.
So do you think, like, so are your thoughts then, or at this point, that either A, they're trying to damage the craft with it, or is this some sort of fuel for the craft, or is the craft trying to clean up this mess that somebody or something is laying down? What are the lines of thoughts you're going down as you're watching this?
Well, the three things that you just laid out are different theories, and there are more about the connection, because people are starting to tune into this, which is great. Initially, I'm thinking military. I'm thinking this is midair refueling. These craft don't have to land. All they have to do is spray the fuel on top. They're going to take them in and refuel whatever they do with that material. And I definitely want to touch base on what's the possibility in that material later.
Okay.
When I opened up to the reality possibility of ET craft, thinking, why would ET craft be taking in chemtrails? Why would this possibly nefarious project, whatever it may be, would they benefit ET craft, or would they try to harm them for some reason? And for me, if it's not military and it's like an ET type craft or an interdimensional type craft, it seems like, to me, that they'd be harming them. They would be clogging their systems. It could also be a form of detection, because they do take in a concentrated form of these materials. Maybe they're more easily detectable via radar, thermal imaging, and whatever. So that's where I am right now. Detection, damage, refueling, it's one of them. It all depends on who they are.
And what about the idea possibly that something is attempting to clean up, to not allow the spray to fall to the earth? Like,
that would be fantastic. And that would probably be the good guys coming in,
right,
taking care of business. And that is another option. I have to leave that open. Can't close it off. That we've got some helpers up above. I like to believe that. It's a positive thing. I just don't know.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think it's probably on a certain level, all of those things. I think that we're looking at some of all of that, and maybe we or you don't have the exact details right, but we're not wrong either. So that's really interesting. Randy, what do you think?
You know, the more I listen to it, they all make sense. And as we've said before, we would like to have one answer. We would like to sit down with our checklist and scratch off an X's and get to the bottom and go, my God, that's it. And it's not, because these are what I call multifarious operations. They are so closely intertwined with so many things we don't understand, including inside the black ops themselves, you know, the black military and what they're doing. What these craft represent in terms of our existence here and operations that are going on out there. If these are friendly craft, then we hope they're, sort of guardians of the galaxy and taking care of us, and yet there doesn't seem to be, well, there is some evidence to that, actually. The good ETs out there taking care of things, because apparently they've been shutting down nuclear silos as well and killing the activation codes on nukes over the years. So we don't know. And, I think one of the fascinating things about what you're doing, Sean, is that you're willing to thread through all of this with the uncertainty and simply compile the evidence to give us a picture so that, because, quite honestly, I don't think we've even known the right questions to ask a lot of times. We do the chemical analysis, we do the visual observation. We have a sense now that what is going on in the skies in terms of the geoengineering agendas is not a good thing. But at the same time, we don't really know the other side of this. So there are so many things going on that, like you, I sometimes just want to look at it and go, I don't have the answers for this.
The other thing I just thought about is it also doesn't even have to be good ETs trying to help, if that's the case. If we're looking also at technology that belongs to a breakaway civilization, there has to be both good and bad people
and
involved.
There's that. Yeah.
Yeah, so, I'm sure that there's, just like anything else, just like on Earth, just like ETs, just like whatever, there's a faction that are just completely self-serving, and then there's always the people that, care about their fellow man or other living sentient beings. And so there's that too. There's the breakaway civilization. Have you looked into some of those kinds of things at all, Sean?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The whole thing with me now is we as researchers, and there's a lot of us who do this. It's not just me. A lot of people are way ahead of me on this. They've been watching for a decade or more. But for me, it's correlations. What connects? What information is out there? So initially, I was lost. I mean, I figured out, I'm like, what is going on? There's got to be information out there about this. I went online, couldn't find anything. And it wasn't until I put out my first 9 parts of the series where I got some attention. And then the other people who did this came and said, yeah, you're on it. Let's join up. Let's trade notes, so on and so forth. And that was great for my sanity as well, because I knew I wasn't nuts at that point.
Yeah.
But let me address the chemtrail thing real quick. I want to go back to the origins of the word chemtrails. And people in the community now say, oh, don't use that. But it was mentioned apparently on the cover of an Air Force document many years ago. The initial chemtrail mention. And then in H.R. 2977, the Space and Preservation Act of 2001, it was also deemed as an exotic weapon. So if it's a weapon against whom? So I find that very telling. And so, yeah, going back and finding correlations and connecting with people, and does this connect or does it not? It's hard to tell. So
I know one of the people that you correlated a lot of information with, and even I appeared on, I heard him on some interviews with you, was a guy who lives in the Antelope Valley. I can't recall his name, but it's very interesting. Where I live in Los Angeles in the San Fernando Valley, and my mother lives in Ventura. And so when I drive to her house, I'm just directly over the hill from what would be Antelope Valley. And I have to say that the strangest things that I've ever witnessed in the sky, I witnessed on the drive from my house to my mother's house. I have seen all sorts of things, and I assume that's the area that your friend was looking at. I don't know if you want to mention his name. I know he's had lots of issues, but you know who I'm talking about, don't you?
Absolutely, and he'd love it. He's one of my best friends nowadays, and he's one of the people that allowed me to keep my sanity by finding him with the initial release, because we started seeing the same things at the same time, and he started putting out videos. That's Jim Kerr of
Yeah, so whatever he's looking at, I'm seeing it. We're only 30, maybe 15 or 20 miles from each other, but there's like a hill or a mountain sort of between us. And when I'm driving that patch of road, I have seen in that patch of road astral cities. I have seen large faces and large, like what look like people formations out of clouds, like walking across the sky. I've seen lots of what is sort of like black ash or black kind of coal ash, like coalescing around things. And one of the theories that I sort of came up with about that, what that black stuff is, what that black coal ash is it's kind of like when you used to play Magnadoodle or Etch-a-Sketch, and it's like sort of a magnetized kind of particle that I think allows energies. Whether we want to talk about it as energy fields or we want to talk about it as demonic or darker energies or whatever, that makes it easier to attach to sort of give form to in this reality. But I've literally had swarms of that black stuff like right in front of me, like almost like I'm chasing it in my car. I have seen the strangest things in those 30 miles, and it's just exactly across the mountain from where he was talking about seeing a lot of the things he's seen. You seen any of these kinds of things? What's your response to that, Sean?
Yeah, a lot. And where he's living, you've got Plant 42, you've got Lockheed, you've got all those places surrounding there.
Yep.
And he's recording and seeing above that. It seems like that's the testing ground for it. You know, whether it's hologram faces or fake clouds or whatever. The dust you talk about, Jim and I have had many conversations about this, and independently we came up with the same idea, and then we started trading notes, and it's like, wait, we're thinking the same thing, because if this is a military type project, we have to take in the possibility of nanomaterials, nanoparticulates. Yeah. And that's where we go with this. I've never mentioned this before, and I'm glad I had the chance to mention it now. But I remember it's got to be 25, 30 years ago. I remember reading in a magazine a report about IBM, and IBM was able to stabilize molecules next to molecules. Okay, and this is very important at that time. And the example that they showed was that they wrote out the letters IBM in molecules. This is the beginning of nanotech.
It goes way back. Yeah. I remember that story too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Way back.
So if I'm able to build IBM, wouldn't I be able to easily build a bar, let's say, that's a foot long, made of, one molecule thick material? And if I were able to do that, could I replicate it, and could I make a second bar, and so on and so forth? So it seems like the possibility is there to create virtual machines made of nanodust. Yeah. And have it just all connect electrically. So when I talk with Jim about this, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Are these craft that we're seeing made of nanodust? And is that why an object, let's say an airplane, passes right through it, and there's nothing that happens? There's no collision because it's just dust.
So that's interesting. That's really interesting that you say that, because, okay, so one of the things, and I wasn't going to mention this, but since we're getting super weird, I'm just going to mention it.
You didn't think this show was not going to go super weird,
okay,
did you?
And so since we
let's do it.
Since we already mentioned inside them and nanomaterials, okay, and obviously people know about like Morgellons thing. I went through a period of a couple of years ago where I had really strange stuff coming out of my skin, and it didn't look exactly like what most people who are reporting Morgellons are reporting. What this looked like to me, what was coming out of my skin were red sort of triangles. And the funny thing about them, Sean, is they're the exact same shape as your craft, with the jagged stuff on one end and triangular, okay? And so when I went in, I tried to research for a really long time about them. And what I finally was able to come up with when I got the right string of words together, because you're always trying to search for in different ways, was that it was data storage technology. It was silicone data storage technology. And the funny thing about that for me is, one of the things that we talk about on this show a lot is black ops and projects like Project Talent and MK Ultra. And some of us have had varying levels of experiences and involvement with that. And one of the things that I have sensed for a long time that I am a tool or mechanism for is I have an incredible memory. And I've also wondered if somehow I was used for data storage. So I have things coming out of my skin that look like nanotechnology kind of thing, that are the exact same shape, although obviously much smaller. And I mean, literally triangular with jagged edges on one side coming out of that. This isn't happening with me anymore. It was kind of like once I discovered what it was and started sort of talking about it to people, it was funny how it kind of stopped. But I can't get any weirder than that. What say you guys?
Well, what's interesting to me, if I can just kind of pipe in here a little bit, somebody just sent me an article this morning. This goes into the exotic as well. It's an article. I'll put this link up when I put the show up. It's on calltoactions.com, and it's about this swarm, the edge of the cloud integrating man-machine transhumanism agenda. And it goes into a lot of the exotic technology that's being developed by private defense contractors and the military itself. And the tangent in all of this is to begin basically nano-engineering on the human level, and then it gets even worse because it goes into direct induction into the brain operation of operational neuroscience. Mm-hmm. Where they're going with this is basically in direct applied applications related to neuro control. There are patents that have been issued. There's an enormous amount of research that has gone into this. Basically, it is about what's called a neurophotonic interface, getting fiber optics into the body. So now we're back to fiber optics. We're going into silicon, but we're also into the nature of this replicating nano architecture that looks to me, and this actually, this may sound exotic. I've talked about this before, and I've gone down this path mentally for a long time because it's very clear that they are embedding nanites into the chemtrails along with some other substances that don't make sense unless you factor in that what they're doing is slowly building into our biology something that corresponds to the same electrical field they're creating in the sky.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I can't really comment on that too much. I do believe in control, and I believe in MK Ultra and these other things that are very well possible. Wouldn't that be great? From what I understand from the chemtrail thing is the barium and strontium, which is kind of mundane, boring really in comparison to what you're talking about. We're breathing it in, whatever it is. And it's probably written into a law like, let's say HR, 105-85, which seems to protect us from any of this fallout, whatever it may be. But in the exceptions, actually allow the whole damn thing to take place. Does it have to do with the craft? Yes. Does it have to do with our biological systems and control? Maybe so. I just don't know.
Yeah. And I wasn't throwing that at you. So, it's, as we go into this conversation, there's a lot of things that hit my eyes. And sometimes this just happened to come today, and I looked at it and I went, whoa, that's way interesting. And it's part of research that I've been doing for a long time. I mean, yeah, the strontium, the barium, let's not forget aluminous oxide. And by the way, all these compounds are heavy metals. All of them are toxic. All of them are considered hazardous materials in the workplace. Aluminous oxide, for instance, comes with what's called a manufacturer's safety data analysis, which means that when it is placed into the workplace, it must therefore have the attendant sheets filed and on hand for the safety officer to inspect, because it is considered a material that is hazardous to humans, as does barium, strontium, and all of the other components that we're finding in the chemtrails, ignoring the biological components for a minute. So the question in my mind is kind of fundamental when I say, what the hell are they doing spraying toxic materials in the sky that we are breathing in, when these materials, if you are found abusing them in the commercial workplace, will get you major fines from the Department of Environmental Protection? There's something else going on here.
So my response when I hear that is that, and this is just where I go, because I think everything has like sort of things are like tertiary or trinary or whatever, is that they need those things in the body because that's what they can sort of bounce frequency off of to allow whatever the biological, nanotechnology, partial biological things to form and function. So I think we're looking at something that is a three-element thing. We're dealing with frequencies, we're dealing with conductive metals, and then we're dealing with things that are created or allowed to flourish in that environment where those two things are bouncing off of each other. Sorry about that sidestep, Sean. I hope it didn't freak you out.
Yeah, did we pull you too far off of your game, Sean, or can we pull back to this and get back to where we need?
No, absolutely not, because it just kind of proves what we were talking about earlier, that there's probably multiple programs, and any of these things are feasible. Yeah, are they turning us into pitchforks? Probably. You know? Do I see
that one before
of graffiti on the side of interstate walls that say we can hear the hum at 3 a.m.? Yeah, I've seen those too. So I'm giving it 90% probability that's one of the programs.
Well,
we can hear the hum at 3 a.m. What explain that?
I hear it all the time.
No, I've seen several things. It was photographs here in New Orleans of people graffitiing literally on the sides of interstates, and that was one of the sayings.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating. That's amazing. So while we're on I guess this is slightly divergent, but someone who I know and trust told me a story that they'd heard from another researcher who's very well known for discussing things that go on in the sky. And apparently she had been told by somebody that one of these kinds of craft that was sort of a chemtrail kind of craft was flying low in a certain area. And when this person looked at it, they saw there was a number on it, but the number looked like a phone number. So they called so this researcher went and called the phone number. And when she got through, somebody answered, and they answered the phone, United States Space Agency, not NASA, United States Space Agency. And she started talking to him, and he proceeded to tell her that there was like something going on with like some kind of artificial intelligence that was telling them to do this, that was like making these things happen, and that they couldn't figure out how to turn it off or make it stop. And I was just thinking about this. I don't know why I thought about that when you told me the thing about you seeing graffiti with I hear the hum at 3 a.m. I don't know why. It has no connection, but that was the next thing I thought of, was that, did you find that bizarre? Have you heard anything like this, Sean?
Well, in a way, yeah, because people do think they see their name written in chemtrails. They see their numbers written in the patterns in the clouds and that kind of thing. So I've seen a lot of that. I've seen a lot of reports of it. I personally haven't seen that kind of thing, but there are people who do.
Not my name. Actually, last Thursday, and I posted this on Facebook, and I have to go find the photo. I took it with my phone camera, which is pretty high definition. But I watched a chemtrail operation here. I'm in southern central Pennsylvania, pretty close to the Mason-Dixon line. And I watched these planes coming in from the north, coming off of the horizon. There's a large range of mountains, part of the Appalachians that sit to the north of me. These planes came in, they did hatch patterns, they did their X's, they did some loop-de-loops, and then, lo and behold, in the midst of all of the squalor in the sky, there was a Z, an O, and what I took to be a D. Now, I don't know what any of that means, but I haven't even had time to pull the photo into Photoshop and tweak it to look at it. I simply threw it up and asked people what they saw with it. I don't know how aircraft have the ability. Well, I know they have the ability, but I don't know what kind of mission you're flying that you're able to do this, this, and this, and what the hell that even means in terms of aerosoling operations. I will say that in all of the observations I've made, they always seem to sow these things into the prevailing winds, which right now have a northwest trajectory, and that's exactly where they're coming from. And after an hour of doing this, the sky turned into this garish purplish gray, It was just an ooze all over the place. And the people on the ground are just walking around like, yep, just another day. And I'm going, what's the matter with you people? Yeah. So, they're putting all kinds of things up there, and I can't help but think, if they're doing that, are they using subliminals? Are they using triggers? Are they putting symbols there? Cloud watchers have reported seeing all kinds of things in the sky for past centuries. And I mean, people who watch the sky like me, I look at the sky like, oh, what's coming next? I mean, I've done this since I was a kid. So we have the ability for huge amounts of abstraction. And as an artist, you would appreciate the fact that when you begin to present things in that huge of an arena, that's a really freaking big canvas. You're now creating an environment where you, in fact, can do embeds and potentially subliminal visuals as well.
Yeah, I agree. It's like the big silver screen in the sky.
Yeah.
I remember in the 80s when Coca-Cola wanted to put up a satellite that would show their logo floating around the world constantly. Holograms. Talk about holograms a little bit and the possibility of that. I mean, I've seen plenty of it. I don't think I captured the face of God. I think I captured the face of a hologram of God. And when we start talking about that, we could start talking about Project Bluebeam.
Yeah.
That's a possibility.
Yeah.
So, and nowadays it seems like that could very well come into play very quickly because they can. The technology is there. If you can take Michael Jackson and Tupac Shakur and Elvis and recreate them on stage and have people pay money for it, what can you do in the sky for tricks? So that's what we've really got to contemplate and figure out, is it a hologram? Is it fake? Is this real? Is it disclosure? Are they coming in for a landing or not?
Yeah, so the other day I saw, maybe your friend Jim saw this as well. So the other day they completely obliterated the sky very early in the day to the point where the whole sky was just that milky white. And I was thinking about that there was a track a few years back. It was like something silver screen on the magazine, something like that. I was thinking the sky is now completely a silver screen. And I went to work, and a few hours after I'd been at work, I went outside because we have some tables outside. I went out there, and I looked, and off in the distance, there was now what I would term some sort of an astral city type of thing. And then in this sort of astral city, all these sort of black sort of triangle-looking things. But this didn't look exactly like other ones I'd seen before. This looked more projected to me. And my thought immediately, and again, this is in that same area that your friend finds all these strange things in the sky, that they spent the whole morning creating the movie screen, and now it's time for the show.
Yeah, it's like testing's going on. They're seeing what they can get away with. Could it be subliminal? Yeah, it very well could be. Could it be telling you to do things? Maybe. I just don't know. But as I said, technology is there. We can briefly talk about barium and strontium being used as a hologram material because there is a document out there, an Army document. I think it's from either 1988 or 1998, and it talks about strontium barium niobate and its use in the formation of holograms. I found that really interesting.
Huh. Yeah, I mean, that's what we're, that has to be on a certain level what we're looking at. I mean, how is it that the chemtrails would be barium and strontium, and then there would be technology that is holographic that involves that, and then we're seeing these kinds of things right where they're spraying that material.
What a coincidence, huh?
Right,
What a coincidence. Guess what, folks? We're at the top of the hour, and we're going to take a break here. Emily, what do you got for us in the mix this week?
All right, so we have a track called Cloaking, and it is by an artist named Foog, and I thought it was appropriate for our guest this evening.
Absolutely appropriate. We'll show you that. We take the break. We'll come back in about 7 minutes. This is
I just wanted to say, you're also going to be looking at some of Sean's artwork while we play the track.
Excellent, excellent. Do that as well.
Thank you.
Take a break. Smoke them if you got them. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the second segment of OffPlanet TV. And with me, Emily Moyer, my co-host and producer for this show. And our guest is Sean Gautreaux. Sean, before we go any further down the line here, two things. First off, I need to say we're streaming live on Conscious Consumer Network. And as always, we want to remind you to support free and independent media. That's consciousconsumernetwork.tv. Our website is offplanetradio.com. You can go there to find information about this show. And Sean, give us your website information and where you can be found on the web, your presence, your footprint, if you will.
Sure. Thanks. I've got my YouTube channel, which is Industrial Surrealism, all one word.
It's a great name.
It started back in 2006. It actually refers to my paintings. Years ago, back in college, somebody asked me, is this pop? What is this? I'm like, it's surrealism, but it's industrial. So it's Industrial Surrealism. And I initially started that channel to show Katrina videos, evacuation videos. But since I had it up, that's where I started posting all these videos of the craft, and the name made sense. So if you go to YouTube, Industrial Surrealism, you'll see the series. The series is called What Is in Our Skies. Now I've titled it Who/What Is in Our Skies. That I've got a website, which is simply whatisinOurSkies.com. I've got a book out on Amazon titled the same thing, What Is in Our Skies. And my personal art site, my personal art gallery is art504.com, art504.com. So that's my presence mainly out there.
Randy, with us?
Yeah, I am. I got distracted here for a minute. I had a walk-in. Live on the air walk-in experience. So Sean, like I said on the break, we don't want to pull you away from your message. Sometimes we are very nonlinear and we pull a lot of things into the mix. But one of the things that we want to talk about is something I think you have been edging towards, and that's Project Condine, what that is and how it plays into the scenarios that you've been basically postulating in your videos and your work on the web.
Yeah, I continue to do this research, even though I consider myself pretty much self-retired, because I've been doing it 5 years. I've put out a lot of information, and I just can't do it as much as I used to.
Yeah.
However, if there's something weird outside taking place, I'll go out and I'll take some pictures and hopefully make a video. But I've stepped back from it a bit. However, I do keep my ears perked open for any pertinent information. And there is something that came out of the Ministry of Defense in England recently that I've heard mentioned a few times, and I started looking into it. And this may be an answer to this. It was a project done by the MOD. It was done in the late 90s. I think it terminated in around 2000, but it was a few-year study about things in the atmosphere they couldn't explain. And my initial look into it was via, I think, Wikipedia. And even in that short description of it, they were talking about the same kind of things that we're seeing in the skies. These triangular objects that refract light that appear as black triangles. So a lot of that is possibly coming into play. It is possible that the governments have studied this already and already know all about it, and I think they do anyway. Mm-hmm. But this information was recently declassified, not the whole thing, but a lot of it. So I traced it back to Nick Pope. He had said some things about it, and I emailed him, and he actually got back to me very quickly and sent me to the source of it. So Project Condine, Condign, is one of the things that I'm currently looking into and trying to decipher if it's an absolute match to what we're seeing up there. And it's starting to look that way.
You mentioned the triangle-shaped crafts, and I have to bring this up because there's kind of a place where you and I dovetail into it, and it has to do with Trevor James Constable's work, which I believe I heard you mention on a recent interview. You actually got to speak with Trevor James Constable. I believe he's deceased now, isn't he?
Yes, he passed. I want to say it was March 31st.
Yeah, okay. Year. Thanks. We need to put that in the record so that we don't wind up with another Mandela because I actually Trevor James Constable's work has come up in the work that I've been doing on the Archons with Robert Stanley. And I was of the opinion back when I first interviewed Robert Stanley that Trevor James Constable was deceased then. So I'm trying to make sure that it's not a senior moment or another one of these Mandela effects. So we're going to stay straight on this for the record.
Good. Jose Escamilla was working with them, using some of his info in a new movie. Some of my footage will be in that movie as well. And hopefully it'll be out this year. So, yeah, it came from Jose, so I trust it.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's actually somebody we probably want to talk to in the future as well. Jose's work's very interesting. He's kind of like you. He's on the bleeding edge of research in ufology. And, what Trevor James Constable was looking at is something that I've considered, and Emily, you and I have talked about this, the concept of these organic craft. Constable comes at it from one tangent. Robert Stanley and I had sort of gone into it from the standpoint of the Gnostic archons, which goes into a whole other things that we won't deal with here. But many of us who have had contact experiences have sensed there's an organic element to the craft themselves, that there's something visceral, something living about the craft, that these are not just mechanistic, normal nuts and bolts type things, but that they have, I will say, a living presence, not necessarily biological the way we understand it. So in all of that, does this fit into a hypothesis as you see it in terms of what we're seeing in the skies? And it may even address why these crafts show up at very opportune times as well, even going into the fact that they're seen literally pulling the chemtrails out of the sky.
Yeah, Trevor, I did have a chance to speak to him briefly in a really strange conference call. I did have to ask, I was able to ask him a question, and I explained to him I've been studying these triangular craft for a while, and at the time I didn't have his book. I just knew that he knew something about these things. He was talking about the skyfish, the flying rods. Yeah. I had recorded these things as well, so he's like, oh yeah, I know about the triangles. I know about those triangular craft. So I ended up buying his book, and I've actually got it in my hands right now. If you look at the cover, it's called The Cosmic Pulse of Life. There's an illustration on there which is very close to the standard craft.
Yes.
Very close. Okay, if you turn to page 271, there's one sitting right there that was photographed in Australia in 1969. Page 306, it looks like the bottom photograph is some more of them. So it seems like he did this, back in the 50s and 60s.
Yep.
How far did he go with it? Well, he went far enough to reach a lot of us. Yeah. But he didn't have Facebook nowadays. He didn't have the kind of communication that we got, which is really connecting a lot of this and trying to explain it. So I salute Trevor. He was a great man, and I think he's really the forefather of this whole thing.
Another aspect to this that's not inconsiderable, Sean, is the digital element. We're now in the age of digital photography, and I know that personally, I'm still trying to wrap my head around digital photography. I have a full-blown 35 millimeter film system that sadly has sat gathering dust in my closet that I'd used extensively for about 20 years. The digital era has brought something else to it because of the sensors that are in these cameras. We're now getting the orbs and many of these other, I will call them effects from the standpoint that they appear to be anomalous effects, but they have shown up too many places, too many times under circumstances that, let's just say, are fortuitous, to be accidents or to be aberrations. Yes, there are lens flares and all of the other artifacts that you would get with normal photography, but the digital cameras themselves now have extended beyond human perceptual range. How does that play into what you've been doing in terms of capturing these images versus, I guess, old school film technology where, and I'll just say this, back in the 70s when I learned photography, we actually shot infrared film at times. Now we don't have film anymore. How are we doing ultraviolet and infrared photography?
It plays a major role into it. It really does, because when you think about it, you analyze it, you're really looking into different dimensions that the camera can pick up, but your eyes can't pick up. So let me start with the fact that the human visual range is somewhere between 360 and about 700 nanometers. Anything below that is ultraviolet. Anything above that, you start getting into the infrared range, the true infrared range, which is heat and cold and so on and so forth, microwave radio, and whatever. So we are really seeing just a limited slice of reality around us. That's the way I believe we were designed, as simple little monkeys. So when you get a camera nowadays, the sensor is able to pick up on a more fuller range. It goes beyond what we see. Without the filters in front, that sensor will pick up ultraviolet, the visual spectrum, near infrared, and beyond. Unless you get like a true thermal camera, and you're looking into the true thermal range, which is where I believe these dimensions are interacting in that range up there. So when I started buying video equipment and looking into different people who were videotaping UFOs, I figured, it's probably a good idea to get into infrared at least, night vision. If I can get into ultraviolet, that would be great. And what I realized is that most cameras have sensors that go beyond the visual range of humans. And what they do is they place in front of it a filter to block out ultraviolet and a filter to block out infrared. So what the camera's really picking up is what we would normally see. If you remove those filters, you're going into, full spectrum. You're going into all the other ranges, which is kind of tricky. But when I started, I had an old mini DV camera that I opened up, tinkered with, disabled some filters, and I was able to get it into full spectrum. And then I bought some cheap filters to go on top of that to block out everything but ultraviolet, block out everything but infrared. So the camera was seeing into these other realms, into these other spectrums that I couldn't see. If I were to hold the filter up in front of my eye and look into the sun or look into the light, it would still look black, because I personally, in my visual range, couldn't see anything, but the camera could. So that's a pretty good trick, which leads me to people can do this inexpensively. You can go on your favorite auction site and research ghost cameras, full spectrum cameras, and for $300 and up, you can get one of these things and start looking into these other dimensions that are all around us. So,
it's interesting that you would bring up other dimensions, because I actually am of the opinion that the more I've examined this alongside the UFO thing, the paranormal thing that's going on, everything from ghost hunters to apparitions that appear in backgrounds, the shadow images, the shadow beings that people are reporting and that I've seen myself, that in fact we're really kind of in a continuum where our perceptual ability is limited. But every once in a while, it's like the aperture on the camera opens and we get a glimpse into this, which goes back into all of the things that you're photographing and documenting here. We're seeing beyond, let's just say, the other side of the veil. The veil itself is thinned, which is what I think is part of this whole agenda. People have talked about the shift, about the consciousness awakening. What happened with 2012, the expansion of human consciousness, the collective opening of a third eye or second sight, all of these things are not inconsiderable to the conversation we're talking about, because we're not dealing with normal reality as we know it anymore. Once you begin to step into this, you really are kind of plunged into some places that aren't comfortable, which is kind of what you talked about in the first hour. What is your sense in terms of this perhaps being on some level an awakening, and it is both good and evil at once, as an outworking of the arc of humanity?
Yeah.
I know. There's no easy questions here, sorry.
No, I know what you're saying, because it was a mind bleep for years, trying to comprehend this kind of stuff, and not coming from this kind of background. I'd only seen a few things in my lifetime that are really questions in terms of UFOs and ghosts and that kind of stuff, but this stuff just blew my mind. So when I started putting the information out there, I started getting messages like, Sean, these are really interdimensional craft, and this is what's going on. And I blew that off, because I'm thinking this is hard edge, metal, military, Aurora type looking things, and maybe not. But I had to think back, and in 1991, somewhere around there, I had an experience where a figure disappeared in front of me, and I couldn't explain it. And so that was possibly interdimensional. So if ghosts and apparitions are interdimensional, and that's a reality, why couldn't it fit into what I was seeing up there? Am I looking at interdimensional craft? Possibly. So, yeah, it's been a process of accepting different things and saying, okay, I'll leave that open. I can't block it out. And maybe it does fit in, and the more I think about it, it is starting to fit in a lot more.
That's it's so. I think a lot of ways what we're seeing is a merging of dimensions, especially when you consider things like the CERN, Large Hadron Collider, and we have these things going on like this Mandela effect. I think this is part of a similar thing. And I think that, there's this frustration for some of us that why can't other people see this? Why aren't they waking up? And I think for some reason, certain people, including ourselves, are gifted with this ability to see these things early on. And I think that some of these people who sometimes we get angry at because they're not waking up, or because they see the chemtrails now finally, but they still can't say they can't see the craft, they may not have that skill as refined as well as we have, because we've been, something about us made us aware of it earlier. And I think that one of the things that's happening right now, because I'm noticing this with more and more people noticing things, Sean, I think one of the things, and this probably will put a smile on your face, but there isn't just the people that you affect who directly see your videos. There's also like the 100th monkey thing. And I had this experience last weekend. I met a friend at a party who I hadn't seen in a while, and he was showing me some pictures of some art he was working on. And when that reel was over, there was a picture of a cloud. And I asked him, what's that? Why did you take a picture of the cloud? And he said, I just thought it looked weird. And in that cloud he had a picture of, I was able to find 4 items, a larger triangle, a smaller one, and then some of the little things that you call, fish or other little things that are sort of flying around in these things. And I was like, can you see that? And he was like, oh my God. And he expanded it. He's like, oh my God, there is really weird stuff in there. And then I said, do you remember I told you about this stuff a couple of years ago and you thought I was crazy? He's like, I do remember you talking about that. I'm like, now you can see it. You took a picture of it, and I was looking at it in your camera, and now I'm showing you it and you can see it. So I think there is this expanding awareness and ability to see. And I think that, it's a scary place that we've had to be, that you were in by yourself for a short time, that we've all been in, where we can see this and it's frustrating because others can't. But I think the more we're able to see it and that we refine our skills in looking at these things, but also finding ways of speaking about them that people can understand, will help them to start to be able to see it. And I think that is happening.
Yeah, it's continuing to go, and that's the beauty of it. I mean, when I think it's all plateauing and we've reached everyone, somebody comes into the group or somebody joins up and says, I've been watching this stuff and photographing for 10 years and I didn't know what to think of it, and I'm glad I found your channel. And a lot of these people, I encourage them. I say, go out, document, what you're seeing, and just get these things up on YouTube. And now technology nowadays is easily accomplishes that, and a lot of them have, because I'm so proud of them. They've started their own channels and they're educating more and more people, which is great. In terms of technology, my main camera now, my 2 infrared cameras broke, so forgotten about them. My main camera now is 12 megapixels. It costs about $200. It's got a 50 times zoom, and that is more than enough to capture these things. Once you bring it into your favorite editing program, you apply a little contrast, boom, it pops out. But what's happening nowadays is that it seems to me it's getting clearer. People can listen to me and the other people and say, you're full of it, whatever, but the photographs and the video don't lie. And once they see it over and over and over and over again, do they get it? Do I show them one picture of a triangular craft cloud? Yeah, whatever. I show them 10, maybe it peaks their interest. I show them 100, I show them 1,000, and they finally get it. A lot of people that I've come across have no clue about what's going on. Some of them have seen some things up above in the clouds, the angles, the shadows, that have piqued their interest maybe 10 years ago, and they didn't know what to think of it. There are other people who are just, coming on to it and understanding it. So there's a full range, but the thing is, it keeps on going, and the knowledge is getting out there. And I want to thank y'all again for this kind of program, because of this, some of your listeners who will listen to this program have seen this kind of thing, and others who haven't had the opportunity to maybe opt into it. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's it. So that's what I've been living with for 5 years. I'll walk outside and it's like, there you are again. What do you want?
No, that's really an important point. A lot of this is entrainment. I mean, we were taught how to see, and I've told my listeners and viewers this for a long time. You were taught what to see in the world. You were given a visual field. Some of us had that visual field ripped from us. Some of us had that intrusion into reality because of whatever experiences we've had, and there's many more of us than I think we know of. But you can begin to train the eye. I've described the experience of sometimes, quote, watching the matrix pixelate for a brief moment, of seeing the field of reality just crinkle with the edges ever so slightly. When we train our eyes, when we begin to open up this up here, the non-visual eye, the eye that perceives beyond the visual field, we become more open to seeing things and we become sensitive to them. So in a sense, what you've done through your art, through your photography, and the work that you've done in research is to allow other people to begin paying attention to things they just haven't noticed. I suspect some of this has been there for a long time, maybe even a very long time.
Maybe forever.
Well, if you go back and you look at art, you suddenly realize, my God, that's a UFO in that Renaissance painting there. That's a helmeted man with a UFO in that Egyptian bas relief. It seems like these things have been around for a long time, and maybe we were just taught not to believe they were there anymore.
Yeah, to me, people are going to hate me for saying this, but
good job.
Not our people love you for saying it. Go for it.
Maybe so. Meteorology, weather, people who go to school and study this stuff and get their degrees and go on TV and they're yapping about this stuff for decades, and they don't have a clue. They might as well take their degrees and burn them. So this is so far beyond any sense of reality that we've been taught. You're exactly right, Randy. This is just a different way of perceiving. And I know you all wanted to talk about the art thing, and it's not a definitive answer, but I am an artist. I am creative. I can create things. Could I have ever imagined this kind of reality? Never in a million years. But me being able to look at it and over my life, creating artworks and paintings with patterns and repetition, that's what I can see upstairs, up in the clouds, and I can decipher that as well. But it's not just that. I mean, people who don't have art skills are also realizing what's going on. There's something more to it. I've just gone a little bit further in analyzing photographs and putting things together just a little more technically than others. So there's an art sense to this whole thing.
Yeah, that's one of the things I really like about your work is that there's a beauty. I mean, this is obviously in some ways like a scary, and to some people a dark, and for some people a horrifying subject, but you've managed to capture it in a way that is leaving an artistic impression that people one day may look back at and go, how art turned into reality, or vice versa. So this kind of takes me to where I wanted to go next. One of the things that, this is a question I've been dying to ask you for a while. Me and Randy have talked about it a couple of times. Is I think back on one of the first presentations that I ever heard you give on, maybe it was on Roxy Lopez's show or something, you were talking about having won an award for a photograph you took of lightning striking the Twin Towers. And it was fascinating to me because I don't know how much research into other things you've done, but some people who have talked about 9/11 and the Twin Towers and what happened have talked about part of what happened with the buildings was because of what they were made of. And this would include David Martin mentioning something about that in his book, Coup de 12, and Bob and Ion, Bob Dobbs and his interdimensional imaginary friend Ion, I don't know how to describe him, would talk about the materials that the buildings were made of, and of the fact that the World Trade Centers were actually like a crossroad, interdimensional kind of crossroads, a docking station. And you have this picture of lightning striking there. And one of the things that I thought is that, a lot of people have also talked about over the years, lightning hitting the buildings and it looking really interesting I was thinking maybe based on what those materials are that make it up. People have also talked about having seen craft sort of dock onto the Twin Towers, almost like they're reloading or refueling. And I just have this sense, and I want to ask you about this, that your photograph of the Twin Towers is somehow related to you finding the craft. Are we talking about the same materials? Is it something about these materials that are, it goes back to, is this communicating with you? How is this, I just sense that there's some sort of relation, in the fact that you caught that almost opened up a line of communication to what you ended up discovering years later. What say you about that?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, there just may be. I took those photos in, I believe it was July 2000, and I rented my condo because of the view of the Trade Center. I photographed them from 99 into 2000, not into 2001. But those things, I would sit there. I had a window that was 20 feet by 14 feet, sitting on my computer at night, working at night, and lightning was hitting over and over and over. And one night I decided to get my camera and try to capture it. I had 24 35 millimeter frames in there. And on the last one was a really good strike, where I just hit the button. I didn't even look at it, and it came out great. I didn't win an award for that, though I think I maybe should have. It's a really great shot.
Oh, for some reason I thought you would win a contest or an award or something. I don't know why I thought that. Maybe you should have.
No. I tried to get it out there, and I tried to sell a few copies on eBay, and I got accused of trying to profit off of people's miseries and everything else. So I just kind of gave up on that.
That's
the thing is, yeah, I went through a lot of that nonsense. It's a historical photograph as far as I'm concerned. That bolt, those bolts that night didn't make a sound, and I was about a mile from the Trade Center. Those bolts should have made a sound.
Yep. And, the other thing that makes me think of, that area where the Twin Towers were is near Battery Park. And that's where Tesla used to have his laboratories. And he was famous for talking about all sorts of strange energetic anomalies that would go on there. So we're talking about Tesla. We're talking about these strange things hitting the building, the materials, the craft, the energy fields, and you're sort of in the middle of it. And I just find that in my intuition and my gut that that's not an accident, and that there's a reason that you took that picture, and there's a reason that you are the one who noticed these craft, at least in this day and age, and are presenting it the way they are. And I think that you obviously have, there's something being communicated through you. I don't know if that's how you feel about it, but I think it's amazing. And I think that the way you've presented this is, there's something really beautiful about it. And I feel like you were somehow chosen to present this material to the world. And I think it's really cool. I think it's a really neat way of the way an artist and the universe sort of work off of each other.
Thank you for that. And I don't look at it that way. This whole project, I try to keep my name out of it and try to put the photographs and the video forward. And I don't include my name in the text of my videos and so on and so forth. But I will tell you this. I took that photograph. I had the negative scanned in high res when I moved back to New Orleans. And when I looked at the high res scan, there were things in that photograph which I photoshopped out. It seems like there was a lot of white floating, what I thought was paper, floating in the air, which I said, well, that doesn't make sense. Maybe the wind was blowing and that's a piece of paper. But it was a diamond-shaped white thing in there. And there was a bunch of those that I've never mentioned this before, and I'm so glad you asked that, because not only that, but in one of the arcs with the bolt coming down, around this very sharp arc looks like one of these skyfish, one of these flying rods. And through my videos nowadays, I have a feeling there is a connection between lightning paths and flying rods or skyfish. I really do. So I've never made that public, and one day maybe I'll make a video about it, but no, I really should, actually.
Well, maybe if you have that photograph that you didn't, before it was treated, before you edited things out, maybe if you want to share that, we'd love to include that, because that's that's amazing. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, and so that leads us into this, I've looked at a lot of your artwork, and we obviously talked about wanting to have you on the show before that, but when I saw your video with all of your artwork, I thought, okay, because we want to make art such a part of things going forward, that it would be actually a real honor to have you as our first guest, that I'm on with the co-host. And so I ended up buying one of your paintings, and the one that I bought was called Archon Oil Rig, and maybe we'll get a picture of it to Randy so we can include this in there. And the reason that I bought that, Sean, is because about, I think it was in 2011, it was either the summer of 2011 or 2012, I was on the way home from acupuncture in Santa Monica. I was living downtown at the time. I was driving on the 10 freeway, and I saw what looked like a oil rig platform floating through the sky above West Los Angeles. And I was just looking at it for like 4 or 5 minutes, and what it looked like was some kind of platform floating through the sky, and then there was clouds sort of trying to cover it, but it couldn't, and it kept poking out one side of it and kept poking out the other side of it. And when I saw your painting, Sean, that's exactly what I saw in the sky. It looked exactly like that.
Mm-hmm. I figured there was some kind of connection like that. It was supposed to get at your house today. Did it arrive? No?
It's not here today, but I'm excited.
Okay, it'll get there tomorrow, and thank you for buying that. I'm honored that you did. Do I see a connection between the BP oil spill and Archons? Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, it's funny because when Emily was describing that right now, Deepwater Horizon jumped into my mind, and there's a connection there archontically that we've kind of explored for a while now. I actually was doing another radio show back when the whole BP oil spill occurred, and I did a whole show on it where I pulled all the symbology together and explained all the symbols behind this. And there's there's some images that I attached to that at the time, but for me that was a trigger event. I later came to find out that that may have had something to do with military operations in the Gulf at the time for retrieval of the black goo, yeah, which is connected to the Archons.
Are you aware of the black goo, Sean?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So the
deep stuff. Yep.
Yeah. All of these things come together, and it just, you know, it's funny. I'm in Los Angeles, and it's a major kind of Archon spot. You know, I spend a lot of time in Malibu, which is like where it's a lot of it infested. But that painting really just grabbed me, and I was like, oh my God, I just love that you obviously saw something that I saw, and you know, we both saw it in the sky, and also, you know, in our minds and in reality of what was happening, and you know, an ugly thing that was happening in the world. And that's like one of the really cool connections that can happen through things like art. I also have noticed, I've taken a look at some of your more recent art. I was looking at some of your crawfish paintings that you made during Mardi Gras, and I was particularly attracted to one called the mechanized crawfish. And I can't help but notice that it appears that your art has been very influenced by these craft you see in the sky, because I expect fully one day now to see a mechanized crawfish in the sky.
Well, yeah, there is actually a pattern that is made by the craft that looks like crawfish, and I called it the crawfish cloud, where you've got a main base, and then at the bottom corner of the right and left triangle corner, you've got two craft that pop off in front of it to create cloud cover, and it does look like a lobster or a crawfish. You know, it really does.
Yeah, I've seen those videos where you're talking about the little craft that pop off and do that, and that's interesting. I didn't know that you call them the crawfish, so that's very interesting.
Yeah, that's it's something that's taken off. I've got a show next July. Well, you know, in a few weeks actually, and I've been trying to crank out as many crawfish paintings as possible. So it seems like those are going to take off as well. But
They're cool.
the cloak cloud craft ones that I started was back in 2012, and I did them for a while, and I'm thinking, I'm doing these because I'm an artist and I paint what I see. When I moved back to the city here, I painted the surrounding buildings and that kind of thing. I just paint what I see. Nobody's ever done this before. That's what I thought at the time. And so I made about 20 of them, and I realized nobody's going to buy these. It's kind of like in Spinal Tap when the manager's trying to explain the and he's like, it's more of a selective audience. And it really is, because people don't get it. So, but I
don't get it. No, it's 11.
11. It goes to 11. So I just did them, and I decided just to put them up online and make them as a collection, and I'm so glad that you bought one. You bought one of the really good ones.
And I think that other people will, and I think later on in the future, when more people have eyes to see these things, then there will be value in some of that artwork that you thought no one's ever going to buy. And
yep. That's the way it goes. I'm going to be dead. And then
you may never look at jambalaya the same way again after.
You know, so I think that, yeah, like I'm hoping that people, you know, we're planning to play the video with your paintings, and I'm hoping that some other people will see in them something they've seen and they'll connect with it, because I think that that's really the power of the kind of work you're doing. It isn't just a painting, and these aren't just videos, and this isn't just research. It's the way that they are playing off of each other and affecting people who also have eyes to see, and now you're showing them how you see it, and they're going to respond to it in a different way. And I think this is the way that some of this research moves forward, because we're as Randy's favorite, one of his favorite quotes is, the day of the absolute is over and we're in for the strange gods once again. You know, and I think we're not going forward. It isn't all going to be this kind of hard and fast research as how we go forward. I think there's going to be a lot of perspective and creativity applied to it that is going to be the only way that we actually get answers that make sense to us inside, there isn't going to be proof. There isn't going to be this quote unquote disclosure. There's just going to be what we find and what resonates with us that allows us to move forward in a way that you know, to use whatever we're finding, whatever the truth is, to live more beneficial lives for ourselves and those around us. I also wanted to ask you about, living in New Orleans. You said you've lived some other places, but New Orleans is a really interesting place. You want to tell us about it a little bit and how your art is affected by that, and sort of, it's one of these very storied places for certain kinds of energies and things like that. And just I'd love to hear your take on what it's like to live and create in that environment.
It's a totally freaky town, and it really is. We consider ourselves a different country from the rest of the world and the rest of America, and we really are. We're just a different culture, a very artsy culture. Agreed, and whether it's music or cuisine or the arts, we've got a lot of it down here. So it was really kind of moving back to the city after doing my stint up in New York. I did 7 years in Brooklyn and in Jersey City, and coming back and getting back into the city, into the vibe of it, and what can I do to blend in. So yeah, I started making paintings. I did video games up north. There was no video game industry at the time when I moved back here. So just started doing kind of paintings and weird stuff like that, and just try to fit in. It didn't really work too well, but it seems like recently, after doing these crawfish paintings and these paintings of these cloud craft, people are finally starting to pay attention. And here's something I wanted to mention to y'all about how I've integrated the cloud craft into artwork. In 2010, I stopped painting Mardi Gras floats, which is our yearly celebration. Big murals on large 50-foot floats. I was able to do children's books. And even the first children's book in 2010, before I realized what was going on up above, I was putting UFOs into. And that goes back into 1995, when I was commissioned to do a few plantation paintings here of Louisiana plantations. And I'd do this beautiful plantation, looked like a photograph, and it was very, just there. And up in the trees, I'd hide UFOs as a joke. And it was just saucer UFOs. I've never seen a saucer UFO to this day that I know of. But I just started integrating those things in there for a joke. Hey, listen, look up here and you'll see a UFO. Ha ha ha. That's where it started. When I started doing children's books, I did the same kind of thing. And in the first 4 books, before I realized the craft above, I was still putting saucers in there and little aliens and EEs. But once I realized I was onto something, I thought to myself, I could get bumped off for this. I'm ticking off somebody. I don't know who it is, but they could come to my door one day and just blow me away, and that would be it. So I'm going to figure out a way to incorporate this info about the cloud craft into something that can't be stopped. So I incorporated the designs into the books, starting with book number 5, and realized that if they print 10,000 books, they could never wipe out the information completely. They can never burn all the books. But
hard copy, baby. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I did that with book 5, 6, 7, so on and so forth, through book 14. So now there's at least 100,000 copies of children's books out there with this information in it. I'm still here. So.
It's amazing to me that, see, this goes back to what I was saying before, the fact that you were putting these things into your artwork before you even ever saw them, or you were doing it as a joke. Like, in my understanding, in my intuition about how the universe works, that sort of possibly primed you for being the person to sort of discover or see this. Like when I was saying how you were sort of chosen to do this, this is, you have this ability to leave the evidence somewhere, and and to create artwork out of something. A lot of our research that people have done, when the poop finally hits the fan, it's going to be wiped from the internet, but the art will still exist.
Not only that,
an evidence trail. And
think about this for a minute.
You were a perfect person to do that. What were you going to say, Randy?
Think about this for a minute. Little Johnny is reading one of Sean's storybooks, and next thing you know, he's out there and his awareness is opened up, and he's seeing things in the sky because subliminally that was kind of brought into his conscious reality. So in a sense, maybe what you're doing, Sean, is you're kind of bringing the next generation along in a form of disclosure we hadn't thought about before. This is marvelous.
I think this is creativity birthing,
Yes.
Giving birth to a more enlightened reality.
See, this is what disclosure is. Disclosure really is all of the people out there. And Sean, this will kind of go into the unity thing that we talked about a little bit on the break. We need the hard researchers. We need the people that are compiling data. We need Michael Murphys and Cliff Carnicons and all of the other people that are out there doing the hard research. And then we need the photographers and the videographers and the people who see this stuff. We need all of these different aspects and components, and we need to stop fighting about it. Go ahead and kick that a little bit.
Yeah, I completely agree. Any of my video, any of my photographs are up for review. Anybody who wants them, I'll put them on Dropbox. They can check them out. It doesn't matter because I've got, at this point, 25,000 photographs approximately, and at least 75% of those photographs show some kind of craft in there. And that's just the photographs. So the information is there. We have to come together. We have to start looking at this in a unified way. I can understand the people who won't, but there are many people who do, and they're starting to see it. They're starting to photograph it coming out, which is great, and it's starting to snowball.
I wanted to ask you. I'm sure you follow other researchers and other people who look at the sky, but another person who's doing his sort of project in a similar way. He's not quite as much of an artist as you, but the way he's putting out his information is also artful. I just wondered if you ever followed the information of Crow 777.
Yeah. From what I know of him, he started documenting the lunar wave.
Yes.
And initially I'm like, well, maybe that is that kind of electrical interference, but it's not. He's on to something for sure. And he came out of nowhere, started getting funding. Yes, I'm a little bit jealous, and got a really good following. But the thing is, he's bringing that info out there. And
he's bringing. He talks about the lunar wave, but he's into all sorts of other stuff right now, and he is what I like about him, and you're more of an artist, but the similarity between you two is you're letting it take you wherever it goes. It's not something that you've decided on ahead of time that this is what you think it is, so you're setting out to prove that. And I think it's really cool that both of you guys have kind of come up in this way and are doing that. And I was just wondered, I'm glad that you commented on that. I was just wondering what you thought of his work.
Yeah, cool guy. I think he's legit. I really do.
You know what? We're just about at the end of this, and Sean, I want to kick it back to you one more time. Anything we missed in this interview, anything you want to be heard saying going out, anything you want to reprise as we kind of close out the show?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to say that this is something that's going on globally. Mm-hmm. It's above all of us. Initially, I thought it was a New Orleans thing. I thought it was the weather machine. I thought it was something to knock out hurricanes. But the more I looked into it and realized it was going on in Quebec, in California, in Sweden, in Guatemala, and all these different places who came together, it's a global thing. And if this is disclosure, it's a really cool way of doing it, bit by bit. Breaking it into us over many years, and it's something we can accept. I'm beyond it. It doesn't freak me out anymore. I really don't care, but I'm definitely connected with the community and whatever I can do. It's going to freak people out. It's going to twist their mind for a bit, whether it be a day, a week, a month, or years, but it's not that bad. We get through it. I mean, I thought I was going to be bumped off for putting this info out there. I'm still here. I've never really been messed with, and it's not a bad thing. So if this is the discovery of life forms above us in the clouds, right up above, to me, that is the first step in disclosure. We don't have to look to the Pleiadian system or Mars or anything else. There's something going on right above that's either a crazy hologram or it's reality. And if it's reality, it ties in a lot with like Trevor says, the cosmic pulse of life. So we just have to get to the answers.
Thank you so much for doing this, Sean. I had high expectations and it far exceeded it. I've really enjoyed talking to you and communicating with you, and hopefully we'll talk again. I feel like I found a little bit of a kindred spirit here. And anything else you want to say, Randy, or should I just introduce the track going out?
I think you should just take us right out, Emily.
All right, so on the way out, we're going to be listening to a track since we're talking about waking people up, this track is called Newsflash. It's by an artist named T-Toy on Cloak Records. And there will also be a DJ mix by an artist named Blind Observatory, which I think is appropriate for tonight's topic of discussion. That will be attached to the description box below for everybody to listen to. And enjoy. Thank you so much.
We'll be back next week. The truth is out there. It's inside you. Keep looking up. Good night.
obscure denomination views on energy fields and connections between souls via what she kept calling focus. In response to some sort of prompt or association, she begins to relate this anecdote. anecdote. There she is.